In 1955, the average American family earned $4,400 a year. No stock trading apps, no crypto, no side hustles filmed for TikTok. And yet, by 1970, home ownership hit 63%, and the middle class was the fattest it had ever been in human history. Number 14 on this list built more millionaires than Silicon Valley did in its first 2 decades. And number 3 was so effective that Wall Street spent 50 years trying to convince you it was outdated. These 20 strategies created generational wealth without a single Wi-Fi password. Before we start, hit subscribe, because what your grandparents knew about money might be the smartest financial education you never got. Let us count them down. Number 20, Christmas Club accounts. Every January, your grandmother walked into the local savings and loan and opened a Christmas Club account. She deposited $2 a week, sometimes $5, into a passbook the teller stamped by hand. By November, she had a lump sum waiting. No credit card debt in January, no interest payments bleeding into February. The concept was almost stupidly simple. Forced savings with a deadline. By 1966, American banks held over $4 billion in Christmas Club deposits. That is roughly $39 billion adjusted for inflation. The accounts paid little or no interest, and banks loved them for it. But the psychology was genius. Money you could not touch was money you could not spend. Your grandmother never heard the term behavioral economics, but she practiced it every Tuesday at the teller window. When credit cards exploded in the 1970s, Christmas clubs quietly disappeared. Visa and MasterCard offered the illusion of the same convenience without the discipline. The debt that followed was not an accident. It was designed. Number 19. Buying rental property with 10% down. Before 1980, a working man could buy a duplex in Cleveland or a fourplex in Memphis with 10% down and a handshake from a local banker who knew his name. FHA loans made it possible. The Federal Housing Administration, launched in 1934, insured mortgages so banks would lend to ordinary people. A duplex that cost $18,000 in 1962 could generate $150 a month in rent from the other unit, enough to cover the entire mortgage. You lived in one half, and your tenant paid for the building. Families did this twice, 3 times, building small portfolios of rental homes that threw off cash every month. No property management software, no spreadsheets, just a ledger book and a handyman who owed you a favor. By the time those duplexes were paid off in the 1980s, they were worth 6 or 7 times what the owner paid. That was not speculation. That was patience. Number 18. Whole life insurance policies. Metropolitan Life, Prudential, New York Life. The insurance man came to the door every month to collect premiums in person, sometimes sitting at the kitchen table with coffee while your mother counted out dollar bills. Whole life insurance was not just death protection, it was a savings vehicle. The policy built cash value year after year, money you could borrow against for emergencies, college tuition, or a down payment on a home. By 1960, American families held more wealth in life insurance cash values than in savings accounts. The insurance industry does not like to advertise that statistic anymore. Financial advisors today call whole life a bad investment compared to index funds. But for families who had no access to brokerage accounts, no 401k, and no financial literacy classes, that policy was the only wealth they built outside their home. The insurance man knew your kids by name. He showed up in January to review coverage, and in September to talk about back to school. That relationship kept people saving when nothing else would have. In 1960, nearly half of all private sector workers had a defined benefit pension. You worked 30 years at General Motors, U.S. Steel, or the phone company, and when you retired, a check showed up every month until you died. No investment decisions, no market risk, no wondering if you had saved enough. The company owed you a paycheck in old age, same as they owed you one on Friday. Pensions created the most stable retirement generation America has ever seen. Retirees in the 1980s had guaranteed income, Social Security, and a paid-off house. That triple combination was almost recession-proof. Then corporate America discovered that 401k plans shifted all the risk onto workers. By 2024, fewer than 15% of private sector employees had a traditional pension. The wealth transfer from employer to employee sounded like freedom. It was not. It was the largest transfer of financial risk in American history, dressed up as a benefit. Number 16. Savings bonds from the payroll. Your father bought Series E savings bonds through automatic payroll deduction. 50 cents a week came straight out of his paycheck before he ever saw it. The government sold bonds in denominations as low as $25, making them accessible to factory workers, secretaries, and janitors. By 1945, 85 million Americans owned savings bonds, the broadest ownership of government debt in history. The bonds earned modest interest and matured in 10 years, but the real value was invisible. Money deducted before payday could not be spent at the department store or the bar. Families stacked bond certificates in fireproof boxes and sock drawers, forgetting about them until a child needed college money or a roof needed replacing. That quiet accumulation, $10 here, $20 there, compounded into meaningful wealth over decades. When electronic banking made instant spending possible, the friction that savings bonds created vanished, and so did the savings. Number 15. Buying land on the outskirts of town. In 1952, a quarter-acre lot on the edge of Dallas cost $800. The same parcel by 1972 was worth $12,000. Families who scraped together a few $100s and bought undeveloped land at the margins of growing cities watched their investment multiply without lifting a finger. No improvements needed, no tenants to manage, just a tax bill once a year and the patience to wait. The interstate highway system, signed into law by Eisenhower in 1956, turned rural crossroads into commercial corridors almost overnight. Families who owned land near a planned interchange went from modest means to comfortable wealth in a single decade. This was not insider trading. The highway plans were public. Anyone could read them at the county clerk's office. The difference between those who built wealth and those who did not was often just the willingness to drive out past the city limits and imagine what might be coming. Number 14. Starting a small franchise. The franchise boom of the 1950s and the 1960s created more self-made millionaires than any stock exchange. Ray Kroc did not just build McDonald's. He built thousands of franchise owners into wealthy families. A McDonald's franchise in 1960 cost about $75,000 to open. By 1975, that single location could generate $200,000 a year in revenue. Holiday Inn, Dunkin' Donuts, Midas Muffler, ServiceMaster. The franchise model handed ordinary families a proven system and told them to follow the manual. No invention required, no Ivy League degree, just the startup capital and the willingness to work 16-hour days for the first 3 years. Veterans used GI Bill loans. Teachers pooled savings with siblings. Mechanics mortgaged their homes. The risk was real, but the playbook was tested. Entire family dynasties in the Sun Belt traced their wealth back to a single franchise location opened with borrowed money and calloused hands. First pattern break. Here is where the list shifts from individual tactics to systems that entire communities used. And this next one might be the most overlooked wealth builder in American history. Number 13. Credit unions and mutual savings banks. Before megabanks swallowed the industry, credit unions and mutual savings banks served neighborhoods like members of the family. They paid higher interest on deposits, and they charged lower interest on loans because they had no shareholders demanding profit. A school teacher's credit union in Milwaukee might offer a car loan at 4%, while the bank down the street charged 8%. That spread, compounded across every major purchase over a lifetime, meant families who used credit unions kept thousands of extra dollars. By 1970, over 23,000 credit unions operated in America. They financed first homes, small businesses, and used cars for families the big banks would not touch. The deregulation wave of the 1980s weakened their advantages. Megabanks lobbied hard to level the playing field, which really meant raising costs for the people credit unions had protected. The community institution that once anchored middle-class wealth became, in many towns, a relic. Number 12. The GI Bill. The Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944 was the single largest wealth creation program in American history. Nearly 8 million veterans used it to attend college or vocational training. Another 5 million used the mortgage guarantee to buy homes with zero down payment. A veteran who served 2 years could attend any university in the country with tuition, books, and a monthly living stipend covered by the government. He could then buy a home with no down payment and a low fixed-rate mortgage. In one generation, millions of families leapt from working-class poverty to middle-class security. Economists estimate the GI Bill generated $7 in economic output for every dollar spent. Suburbs like Levittown were built almost entirely on GI Bill mortgages. The program had a devastating blind spot. Black veterans were systematically denied benefits through local administration, a wound that compounded across generations. But for the families who received it, the GI Bill was a wealth engine that no app, algorithm, or investment strategy has ever matched. Your grandfather called his broker, a man he probably knew from church or Rotary Club, and bought 20 shares of AT&T. He held them for 30 years, and he reinvested every dividend. He never checked a ticker. He never panicked during a correction because he did not know it was happening until he read the newspaper 3 days later. That ignorance was an asset. Between 1950 and 1980, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose from 200 to 838, a four-fold increase before accounting for dividends. Investors who simply bought blue chips and held them through every recession, every war, every political crisis built enormous wealth through sheer inaction. The local broker charged commissions that would horrify modern investors, sometimes $50 per trade, when $50 meant something. But he also kept clients from selling in a panic, which was worth more than any algorithm. A licensed plumber in 1965 earned more per hour than most college graduates. An electrician with his own truck and a Yellow Pages ad could support a family of 5 and put money away every month. The trades were the backbone of middle-class wealth before the entire country decided everyone needed a 4-year degree. Apprenticeships cost nothing. You earned while you learned. By your mid-20s, you had a marketable skill that could not be outsourced, automated, or downsized. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and HVAC technicians who started their own shops in the 1960s often retired wealthier than their neighbors with office jobs. The shop itself, the tools, the truck, the client list, all of it had resale value. When the owner retired, he sold the business to a younger tradesman, pocketing a final windfall that today's salaried worker can only dream about. Second pattern, break. Most people think wealth before the internet meant slower wealth. They are wrong. It meant wealth that could not be disrupted by an algorithm update, a platform policy change, or a server going down. The next entries prove it. Before 401k matches became standard, many corporations offered employee stock purchase plans at a discount, sometimes 15% below market price. A Sears employee in 1965 who bought company stock through payroll deduction at a discount and held it for 20 years, watched her investment multiply as the company expanded into every mall in America. IBM, General Electric, Kodak, and Procter & Gamble all ran similar programs. The discount was an instant return on day one, and the long-term appreciation was a second engine of growth. Employees did not need a brokerage account or a financial advisor. They needed a signature on a form in the Human Resources office. The simplicity of that system meant participation rates were high, and the wealth created was real. A 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago cost $14,000 in 1955. The mortgage payment was $85 a month on a 30-year fixed loan at 4.5%. By 1985, that house was worth $95,000, and the mortgage was paid off. That family had turned $85 a month into $95,000 in equity, with no special financial knowledge, no market timing, and no risk beyond making the monthly payment. Homeownership was the default wealth strategy for the American middle class, and it worked because mortgages were boring. Fixed rate, 30 years, no adjustable nonsense, no exotic instruments. You paid your note, and the house appreciated. The 2008 financial crisis happened when banks decided boring was not profitable enough and started writing mortgages designed to fail. The wealth your grandparents built on a handshake and a fixed rate was not an accident. It was the product of a financial system that had not yet learned how to gamble with other people's homes. Number 7. Joining the Rotary, Elks, or Masonic Lodge. This sounds like socializing, not wealth building. It was both. Fraternal organizations in mid-century America were networking engines disguised as community service clubs. A Rotary lunch where a car dealer met a bank manager led to a loan approval the following week. An Elks Lodge where a plumber met a builder led to a contract that kept his shop running for 5 years. By 1960, nearly 1 in 3 adult American men belonged to a fraternal organization. Business was done on handshakes after meetings, not through LinkedIn messages that vanish into the void. These organizations also provided mutual aid. Members helped each other find jobs, financed each other's startups, and referred each other's businesses to friends. The trust, built over years of shared meals and community projects, was a form of social capital that translated directly into financial capital. When membership declined in the 1980s, so did the informal safety net that had lifted entire communities into the middle class. Number 6. Mail order businesses and catalog sales. Before Shopify, there was Sears Roebuck, and before Sears, there were thousands of small mail-order entrepreneurs running businesses from kitchen tables and garage workshops. A man in rural Iowa could sell hand-forged tools through classified ads in Popular Mechanics and clear $500 a month in 1960, a respectable income. No storefront rent, no employees, just a product, a postal scale, and a trip to the post office. The classified ad was the original Facebook ad, targeted by interest and sold by the word. Entrepreneurs tested different headlines, tracked which publications pulled the best response, and scaled up winners. Some built those kitchen table operations into catalog empires worth millions. The direct-to-consumer model that Silicon Valley claims to have invented was already thriving in 1950s America, powered by the Postal Service instead of the cloud. Marriage in mid-century America was an economic partnership as much as a romantic one. 2 incomes under one roof with shared expenses created surplus that single earners could rarely match. A husband earning $5,000 and a wife earning $3,000 in 1960 had more disposable income than a single person earning $10,000 because they split one rent, one set of utilities, and one grocery bill. Married couples saved at higher rates, qualified for better mortgage terms, and weathered job losses more easily because one income could carry the household while the other recovered. The economic advantages of marriage were so well understood that financial advisors in the 1950s listed it as the first step toward building wealth. The wealth gap between married and single Americans has only widened since, but the strategy itself is as old as the institution. Number 4. Maxing out the company match in early retirement plans. When 401k plans first appeared in 1978, early adopters who maxed out employer matches stumbled into one of the greatest wealth-building opportunities ever offered to working Americans. A company matching 50 cents on every dollar up to 6% of salary was handing employees a guaranteed 50% return before the market did anything at all. Workers who started contributing in the early 1980s rode the greatest bull market in history. A $2,000 annual contribution with a company match, invested in an S&P 500 index fund starting in 1982. would be worth over $1.2 million by 2020. The employees who maxed their match from day one retired comfortably. The ones who said they would start next year usually never did. The difference between those two groups is the difference between retiring at 62 and working until 70. Your grandparents made extra principal payments the way some people go to church, religiously, without question, and with a faith that the math would reward them. A family earning $8,000 a year in 1960 who added just $25 a month to their mortgage payment shaved 8 years off a 30-year loan and saved thousands in interest. That freed up payment in their 50s went straight into savings, investments, or helping their children buy homes of their own. Wall Street spent the next 50 years telling Americans that mortgage debt was good debt, that the interest deduction made it smart to carry a balance, that you should invest the difference instead of paying down the loan. The math sometimes supported that argument, but the math assumed people would actually invest the difference, and most did not. They spent it. Your grandparents understood that a paid-off house was not just an asset, it was freedom. Freedom from the bank, freedom from the fear of layoffs, freedom to retire on their own terms. No spreadsheet captures what that felt like. Third pattern break. These final two entries are not just strategies. They are philosophies that shaped how an entire generation thought about money. And they are the hardest to replicate because they require something the internet actively destroys. Number 2, living below your means as a point of pride. The Millionaire Next Door was not a book title in the 1950s. It was a reality on every block in America. The wealthiest families on the street often drove the oldest cars, wore the plainest clothes, and never once mentioned money at the dinner table. Frugality was not embarrassment. It was strategy. A family that earned $7,000 and spent $5,500 had $1,500 a year to invest. Over 20 years at modest returns, that surplus alone could build a nest egg worth $50,000 or more, a small fortune in that era. Consumer culture had not yet perfected the art of making people feel poor despite earning good wages. Keeping up with the Joneses existed, but the Joneses themselves were often quietly broke. The families who built real wealth were the ones who let the Joneses win the appearance contest and kept the cash. Number 1, passing knowledge and assets down through family. The single most powerful wealth-building tool before the internet was the kitchen table. Families who talked about money, who explained how mortgages worked, who brought their teenagers to the bank to open a savings account, created children who understood wealth before they earned their first paycheck, a father who showed his son the rental property ledger, a mother who explained compound interest using the Christmas Club passbook, an uncle who brought his nephew to the shop and taught him a trade. These were not formal financial education programs. They were Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings. The knowledge transferred across those kitchen tables built more lasting wealth than any course, seminar, or app because it came wrapped in trust and reinforced by example. When families stopped talking about money, stopped showing the next generation how the machinery of wealth actually worked, the chain broke, and no algorithm has figured out how to replace it. Here is the truth nobody puts in a headline. Every strategy on this list, from the Christmas Club to the kitchen table, had one thing in common: friction. Saving was hard on purpose. Investing required a phone call, a meeting, a signature. Spending required effort too. That friction was not a bug. It was the feature that made wealth possible. The internet removed the friction from spending and called it progress. Your grandparents would have called it a trap. Try one of these. Just one. Open an account you cannot touch. Buy a piece of land you do not need yet. Pay an extra $50 on your mortgage this month. Then come back and tell me which one changed how you think about money. Drop it in the comments. And if you made it this far, you already know more than most people learn in a lifetime. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next.